band singer like we think of band singers.
No, I was only with one band, really.
And what do you, are there any reminiscences of that time of traveling with a band? How tough was it?
It was hard.
Yeah.
It was hard. We were kind of lucky because the pastor band was kind of a show band, so we would go into a lot of places that where we stayed for a week. Not as many one-nighters as other bands had, but it was kind of great fun. You had to be very young. You had to be as young as I was, which was quite young. I think when I started with the band, I was 18. My sister was 15, and we stayed with the band for 3 years. But a lot of that was traveling on a bus. After work, we would get on the bus and go 300 miles, which was the limit that you could do for the union, you know, and go in and sleep for a few hours and go to, you know, a one-nighter and do it again. Maybe we would do that for 5 weeks at a time.
Murder.
Yeah, it was hard.
It was after the main thrust of the big band time. When it,
Yes.
Yeah,
So it was really the tail end of it. We did not have those. They were dwindling. The places where you could play for a week, the Café Rouge, the Statler, and the Paramount, and places like that.
Because I've done interviews with probably every living band leader left, Les Bronson, but that sounded very exciting. Be in New York where maybe 20 rooms were featuring big bands.
Wonderful.
And
There was the Lincoln Hotel and the Statler, of course, and the theaters on Broadway, the Capitol and the Strand.
were you in New York during any of that at all?
Yes, I was at the Paramount one time with Tony. The first time we were to go into the Paramount, the Andrews sisters were booked in with the band, of course, and so they didn't look too fondly on the Clooney sisters, and I don't blame them. I wouldn't do that today either.
We had Maxine up here. The
Did you?
other day,
She's a bright, wonderful lady, isn't she?
Terrific lady who says success really was a tough thing for them to deal with.
I imagine with sisters it is.
Yeah.
I didn't have that tremendous success with my sister, and so we remained very close.
Yeah, the big success came afterwards.
Yes.
Charlie Shribman's a name that pops up a lot, too. Tell us about Shribman.
Well, Charlie Shribman was my manager's uncle. Charlie Shribman was the guy who started the Glenn Miller Band, or financed it and managed it and so on, and an awful lot of bands in up around Boston. His nephew's name was Joe Shribman, and was Tony Pastor's manager, and therefore I kind of inherited him, and he was my first manager.
Was he a good manager?
Good manager,
Yeah.
good manager, and a nice man.
It took, what kind of courage do you think it took to leave the band and go off on your own, or was that just a thing that had to happen?
Well, it was more than courage. It was a decision that I had to leave to my sister, you see, because we worked together, and I wouldn't be the one to break it up. And so my sister is the one who quit. And she said she wanted to go home. She had a perfectly valid reason, except that I wanted to really believe that she had another reason outside of the one that was obvious. She wanted to. I had a Columbia contract. It wasn't the best contract in the world. As a matter of fact, when Mitch came in, it got to be a lot better. He fixed it in a lot of ways. But at least I could record on my own, and she knew that. But she said that she wanted to go home because she had never been on the other side of the dance floor. She had never gone to a senior prom. She left home when she was 15. And so she said she wanted to go home and not work for a while. That didn't last very long. She went into television right away at home in Cincinnati. But I went to New York, and I didn't have any money, so I stayed with Joe Shribman and his then roommate, fellow by the name of Joe Galkin.
Oi.
Do you remember Joe?
Of course. Up in Atlanta, Joe Galkin. He
Sure.
had Sonny Gale.
Yes.
Had Sonny
Yes, and three sons.
3 sons.
And,
What an opera.
oh, gosh, and that southern accent.
Yeah.
Anyway, I slept on their couch, you see, for about 5 months in New York until I could afford a sublease of my own across the street at the Park Vendôme.
Did you get work?
Yes, but mostly out of town. I found that wherever there was some action with a record, I could get more work, you know, and a higher salary. For instance, in Philadelphia, I could work for a certain salary, but 30 miles outside of town, I had difficulty getting the same amount of money.
Had you cut Beautiful Brown Eyes at that time?
No,
That was
not
before
yet.
then, too.
The first one that I recorded that made some noise, simply because Doug Arthur wrote it, was from Philadelphia. You know, the disc jockey from Philadelphia,
that's
Doug
right,
Arthur?
sure, yeah.
He wrote a song called The Kid's a Dreamer, and I went in and recorded it with a small group.
Who was in charge of your recording before Mitch came along?
Manny Sachs.
And he went in the studio?
The Kid's a Dreamer came after Mitch came. I did some things with Tony's band before that, and then I did some things on the Harmony label with Percy Faith while Manny was still there. But the change came almost right away, that when Manny went to RCA.
What was New York like then to be?
Oh, it was fun.
Yeah.
I had as I said, I had a sublease at the Park Vendome at 340 West, 57th. And I used to meet my friend Nancy Reed, who sang with Skitch Henderson's band, and the two of us would walk up Broadway and go to the movies and stop by Nedick's for, a hot dog. And then she'd drop me off and walk onto 76th Street by herself. It was a different city.
Yeah.
Then, of course, I talk about this with some people from that time. We all say the same things. Things have changed so much, but we're remembering our youth too. So that's things have changed.
Of all the cities that, and all the cities did fall apart somewhere, the saddest was New York because it was the slickest.
So much fun. I remember going to see the third show at the Copa and bringing the champagne glasses and the bottle away from there, after spending a couple of hours at, what was the hotel next to it? The Hotel 14.
Yeah, right.
Where the dressing rooms would be. Go up there and hang out for a while, and then walk back. I lived at the Hampshire House. I had a girlfriend who I was living with, my roommate, who was really rich, except that we didn't have any money. Her mother owned an apartment at the Hampshire House, though, so we had this. No, we had this great address. We had this great address and absolutely no loot at all. We had a Pullman kitchen in the apartment, and we were the only people at the Hampshire House that cooked all the time.
What were the impressions when Mitch Miller came in?
Well, he was scary. He was bigger than life. He also had a way of almost overpowering every department. There was such separation before. Every department did their job, and there wasn't that kind of crossing over. But Mitch had an idea, and he would get so enthusiastic. He would arrange and manage to get it done. Shipping 300,000 records on consignment. Well, that wasn't done with an A&R man before that time. But he was so excited, and that sort of transferred itself into the kind of power that he had.
What were your impressions of him musically?
Musically, I thought that he had wonderful credentials. I also thought that he played down to, again, maybe this was my youth too, because I find that the younger you are, the more pretentious you are, or at least the more serious you are. I didn't have that bubble that he had. I didn't understand that Come On to My House could be important. Or a feeling that feeling that it had was as important as that death-defying love song that you're dying to sing. But maybe that was the young person, working too.
Does it amaze you that in retrospect, now that's 35 years ago, that song can still be sung? If you walk somewhere, it might be as much a trademark as any other thing.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. It's yes, it does amaze me. And I perpetuate it, I think, because there still is. There, no matter where I'm working, there is always somebody there who associates that song with some time of their life. And that's the thing that you sing those old songs for, is just to bring back that moment to that person that's listening.
One thing that Mitch mentioned that he was so proud of is that his records sound good. The people he made records with still sing well. That record sounds good.
It doesn't sound bad, does it?
That record sounds very good.
No, it really does, yeah.
And most of the records, considering the technology that was available at
I
that
know,
time,
I know.
that you had to go
I
do it
know.
all in one shot, and those records sound terrific still. You must have seen some of these repackages, and you hear them on the radio.
Oh, sure.
Music
Oh,
of your
sure.
life formats and stuff.
As a matter of fact, I did. Steve Martin had something down at the Lingerie, a funny thing with a lot of dancers, and wanted me to come in and sing "Come On to My House" a few years ago, and I did, and it didn't sound bad at all. And these kids that were dancing said, "What a wonderful record to dance to!" And I thought, "My God, 30 years."
and you fought it when it was there.
Sure.
Well, you have a story about how you were working in the South somewhere, and you weren't aware of what a big hit, and you came back to New York.
Yeah.
What was all that about?
I was in Florida with Buddy Rich. We were working at a theater in Miami proper, the Olympic. I've forgotten which one, and we. I was only gone for a week. No, as a matter of fact, I was gone for a few days longer because I flew over to Cuba with my roommate and the two of us were in Cuba for a few days, which was wonderful. Then we flew back to New York, and we knew that there had been some action on the records because we had been called down in Miami for some interviews. But we got off at the airport in LaGuardia and took a cab in to go to 59th Street. And there was, it was coming out of a record store, blaring out of a record store, out of a great horn. And more than one was playing the same record. You know, there were a couple of record stores that had those things outside on Broadway. And I remember sticking my head out the window and I said, Jackie, my God, I think I've got a hit record. And it was the beginning of the summer of 1951, and it was something.
What happened to your life after that? You weren't totally a novice before that. You were
No.
working with people like Buddy Rich.
No, but everything was totally different.
What
Everything was totally
changes?
different. It was like stepping onto a merry-go-round that was going about 50 miles an hour. You just barely hold on. That's all you do, is just hold on.
Do you remember how confusing it was? Or?
Yes, I remember being so tired from all the things that, and I didn't want to turn down anything. I didn't know how long this was going to last. In retrospect, I think about the young people that don't have the chance to work as long as I did. Before I joined the band, I was with I did radio for 2 years as well, so I had a lot of background and a lot of experience before. But boy, it's still hard. It was very, very hard. It's hard to make the planes. It's hard to understand why everybody wants you. It's very hard to rationalize why one week you are one person and suddenly you are another. And that can be for good or bad. You know, a lot of friends that I had said, "Well, now that you're a big star, of course you can't." And you know that was strange because I hadn't changed a bit from one day to another. All that had happened was the exterior things had changed.
I had a group, the Eagles, and one of the guitar players, Joe Walsh, made a record about that. He says, I don't know, everybody, I haven't changed. Everybody else thinks I've changed.
It's true.
Around me, and I guess it is true.
It is true.
Yeah.
Everything, you know, it just happened outside. It had nothing to do with me.
Who did you have that you could talk to?
My sister always. My sister
even
and
though
I.
she wasn't there.
Yeah, my sister and I always were very close. My mother was close to me. My roommate Jackie and I are still close. We're friends.
Was there, and was Joe Shribman handling all
Joe Shribman was handling it all, and Joe Shribman had been through a little bit of it with his Uncle Charlie, and with Glenn Miller had a tremendous success, and so he was around that when that happened. Glenn Miller was a very wise man, though. He was very smart, and I remember hearing the stories about Glenn Miller a lot of the times when I was having difficulty handling a certain thing. Joe would tell me one of those stories. I remember picking out a mink coat, and it was cost $8,000, and it was 1951. He said, "I hope it's warm." Joe said, that was his only comment, because that was a very expensive thing to buy at that time.
What happened with Mitch and you at this point? He feeling pretty cocky?
Mitch, oh yes. But that was part of, Mitch felt cocky before it happened.
Yeah.
He was absolutely sure it was going to happen anyway, you know, sometime. But on the road there, I recorded some pretty crappy things. You know, I recorded a song called Canasta that I would like for people to listen to that was one of Mitch Miller's great finds, too.
With making records, what kind of input did you have into what kind of songs, or? You ever
Occasionally,
able to do it?
I was able to do it. But I found myself using the you know, it's the 50s myth, you wheedle rather than demand, and I wanted to do tenderly. But I said, oh, you know, I would say, please let me, da-da-da-da-da. And so I got to do it, but it was after some time. But then it was odd. Then I got into a studio, and Mitch was in the control room, and he's the one who really had the key to helping me get that record, because I was not performing it well. I was not singing it well.
What did he do to make it?
He said, "You are so in awe of this song, and so," see, I had the 22nd record of it. And he said, "You just can't," he said, "you can't feel that way. You've got to feel as though this song was written yesterday, and you're the first person to sing it. You've got to wipe all those other renditions and the fact that it's been around and it's your favorite song and all of these things out of your mind. You're not singing it." And so that helped tremendously.
1952 was a crazy year. You had 6 single records out in that year. Do you recall why all that activity?
I know that I was in the studio all the time. I was singing always.
They would just try. Was it the company who just wanted to get more and more records out of you? Is that
Yes. I didn't have that many albums, you know, Joe. I didn't have that many albums all the time that I was with Columbia. It was singles.
the Tenderly, Half as Much, and Botch-a-Me? Those are three monstrous records.
Yeah.
Were you conscious of things happening outside the United States for you?
Yes. Yes.
How did you?
I was very, very happy about that, and also, you know, it's you can hear about it, but until you go there, you don't really understand what's
When
happening.
was the first time you got out of this country and played somewhere?
I got married to Joe Ferrer in July of 1953, and we went to Europe in January of '54.
For your business or his business?
It was really for a honeymoon, really,
Yeah.
and so we stayed. But I recorded while I was there, and we stayed in England for 7 weeks, and then went around Europe for another 7. So we were gone for some time.
Do you still have a constituency overseas?
Yes,
That-
yes. Japan is tremendously big for me. It always has been.
Do you go play there now? Too?
Yes, I'm going back again in September.
I read about your experience with Tots when you were at your low point.
Yes.
Screaming and hollering.
Yes, Tots of all people, who is the gentlest man that ever lived. He's a wonderful man.
Well, we were there. I've been there a few times. We were there a few years ago, and we were being entertained by all the pioneer people. They were out partying. All those singles in '53 must have been the year of a lot of no records. That must have been Canasta and some others.
Now, '53, Canasta was before
Yeah.
before Come On
But
to My
what
House.
about '53? There were no hit records in 1953. Do you remember why?
I got married.
You got married. You were
I also
married?
had moved here to California, and you see, Mitch was based in New York.
What happened? You know, I came out here. He was going to do a session with you in 1957, I believe. Yeah, that's when I met my wife. I came out with Mitch and Bob Allen, the songwriter.
Really?
He was making a record with Joe Stafford. He was doing a thing with Doris Day, and wanted to try to get a record with you. I don't know if you ever got a date with you. But
1950.
57. I came out in April of '57 with Mitch.
I
on
wonder.
vacation.
I wonder if that was when I was supposed to do a duet with Joe, and I didn't do it.
Yeah.
Big D. What was that from? That was from a lesser show, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
that was the Most Happy Fellow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Talking about Big D.
Yeah.
The relationship with Mitch got strained somewhat. Was
Yes.
it because of Joe? Or?
Yes. Well, there was an interview. I can't think of the man's name now, offhand, but a very famous writer that wrote for the Saturday Evening Post. When you had an interview in the Saturday Evening Post, and it was by Riley, Peter Riley? No, that isn't it. I can't remember. However, it was an in-depth interview that went on for weeks, and so in that interview, Mitch was quoted as saying, pretty soon the marriage is going to break up, and she'll look at me and say, what did I do wrong? I read all the right books. And that tore it.
I don't think so.
Yeah. And then he said he didn't say it, and then the interviewer played me the tape.
And he said,
Yeah, he said it.
through your moving out here, and you were a celebrity on your own, of course. You'd been in the cover of Time magazine and some things like that. But you met some of the most exciting people in the whole entertainment world. That had to be a very heady experience with them.
Yes, with Joe, you mean?
With
You're sure?
Yeah.
Any-
Bogart,
yeah,
Olivier,
yeah.
Cole Porter.
Yes, yes. That was really extraordinary.
Were you caught up in the Hollywood world?
Not really. I found I worked hard all the time as well. You know, I did. I had 5 children in 5 years, from 55 through 60. So that was a lot of it. During that time, I did 2 television series. One that was syndicated on film, with Nelson and the Hi-Lows and guests, and then one on NBC. And I was pregnant with children both times.
Do you recall that period? That had to be a crazy period.
It was it was not all that hard. I think that because I was young, and I didn't have a difficult time being pregnant. I felt all right. I felt really good, as a matter of fact, and my work was here at home. So even though it was long and arduous at times, it still was at home.
What was the movies like?
Oh, the movies were fun, but there weren't. It wasn't any great thing. I played myself always.
Did you enjoy that process?
I really loved it. I really loved, and I love Paramount. I love Paramount. It was a friendly lot. I loved Edith Head. I loved the people that I worked. I loved Bing and Bob, and Dean and Jerry. Dean especially, I adored. Jerry was kind of strange, you know.
What was the Bing Crosby connection? I mean, it occupied so much of your life later on.
Yes, it did.
Life.
It really did, from that time on. Before I got married, actually, I met Bing. And you see, the first thing is that I really admired him my whole life. I wasn't in love with him the way that I was with Frank Sinatra as a fan, you know, because Frank Sinatra is dangerous always, on the stage and on records, and when you're listening to him, it's always a sense of danger. I felt very safe with Crosby. But there was also a kind of a humor about Bing and a way with words that I admired tremendously, and he really was wonderful company, wonderful company. He was very nice to me always. He liked the way that I sang, and he liked the fact that I understood every kind of subtle joke that he would ever do. I was really on his wavelength constantly. We sang exactly in the same range, too. There was never one concession that had to be made lyrically, because our ranges were totally compatible. So that I could pick a key for him, he could pick a key for me. If it was comfortable for me, it would be fine for Bing.
Did you make records?
Yes, yes. But we sang together first on radio. I did the Kraft show to begin with, and then we did White Christmas. Then we did records. Then we did, I did his first television show. Someone sent me a tape of that the other day, the long medley that Frank and Bing and I did together.
Whoa.
Yeah, wonderful. But I worked with him from that time, from 1951 until he died, until a week before he died.
How much did you see of the side of him that some people say was as cold?
Oh, I think it was there, but I think that was his protection, too. I think Bing was very, from the exterior, I've said this before, but he was approachable. The common man could come up to Bing and get an immediate response. How are you? You know, he'd keep moving, but he was very approachable. Frank, on the other hand, has that ice curtain in front of that. You don't approach Frank. You do Bing. In back of that first approach, though, there is a wall that takes some time to get through, past, over, under.
Sinatra talks about admiring Crosby, but he admired him because he was successful. He made money. No, he says, I never learned to sing from him. But, my God, he was this guy making money. I got to go worship him. But you're right about Sinatra. There was always the sense of tension in a room when he appeared. We were there when they were making a record for Robin and the Seven Hoods. It was Dean and Frank and Bing and Sammy Davis. And it was interesting, the style of each one of them in the studio.
The personal style, as well, yeah.
Personal style and vocal style. Bing was absolutely professional. He was in the slot. Every take was right
Joe,
there.
You know, what kills me is that he would come to rehearsal that prepared.
Yeah.
His first rehearsal, he'd be that prepared. It's no joke. He can relax within the framework of what he has to do because he knows it cold. He knows it cold.
He was always prepared like that.
Totally prepared. From the first rehearsal. In the meantime, he had been woodshedding someplace with somebody.
Terrific. Did you record with anybody else extensively?
I did some recording with Frank at Columbia. And then later on with the ones at Reprise that I wasn't singing well.
You weren't you on some of those repertory theater things we did?
Yeah,
at Reprise?
yeah. But I didn't sing very well on them.
What were those, the early...
60s.
Early 60s, yeah.
Sort of middle 60s, I think.
When you came back, you did the Crosby 50th anniversary show. Was that 76?
Yes,
No, it was
70. Yes, it was March of 76, wasn't it?
Had you been doing any singing before that?
Oh, I sang in a lot of little saloons. I sang any place I could make money, really. But I couldn't travel very much because I was going to a shrink 5 times a week.